we look at it like it's like a Bond movie. You have to drop the audience right into the action and do something exciting. Show them why they're watching it, exactly like you said. We have to hook them. And then there's something in that opening that has like a theme. It doesn't necessarily immediately connect to the rest of it as you go back to the beginning and start to kind of tell the origin story. It comes back throughout.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. David Gelb is the creator of Chef's Table, the long-running Netflix documentary series that takes viewers inside the world of restaurants and chefs. David is also the director of Jiro Dreams of Sushi, the acclaimed documentary capturing the idiosyncratic world of master sushi chef Jiro Ono. On this episode, we talk about the creation of Chef's Table and how the show invented a new vocabulary for food documentary filmmaking, and how the show is now the longest-running series on Netflix. We also talk about the latest season and the special seasons dedicated to barbecue, noodles, pizza, and French chefs. David is one of my favorite creators in the food world, and I loved catching up with him. I hope you enjoy this conversation. David Gelb, welcome to This Is Taste. So great to see you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Always glad to be back in New York, and lovely to see you too, Matt.
Yeah, we've known each other on and off for years, and I think I interviewed you for your Jiro movie when that was out, and I remember seeing it for the first time, and this was new documentary for food. This was a new point of view. When you directed that film, did you realize you were kind of changing the vocabulary?
A little bit. I mean, the first indication of it was when I couldn't get anybody to fund it at the beginning. And so
that's a real talk.
It was just not what people thought that they wanted, but I knew that it was what I wanted to see. I knew that I wanted to make something that was like Planet Earth. I talk about like Planet Earth as being something that was really inspiring to me, as well as, the film The Fog of War by Errol Morris. That just kind of showed me that, a documentary is a movie. It can be a movie. And I wanted to make something that wasn't about like an environmental issue per se, although we do address overfishing and things like that from Jiro's point of view. I wanted to make something that was like an emotional journey and not just information. And that's how Jiro Dreams of Sushi came to be. And I wanted to use all the tools of cinema to have that come to bear because, I went to film school. I learned how to shoot things the way that I like to see them. And I was fortunate enough to be able to self-finance with family money that I was getting from editing movie trailers and shooting behind-the-scenes things and, whatever I could do.
EPK guy.
EPK guy.
Yeah.
I was the EPK guy in a number of things at the same time, and I was taking, building out my camera kit, and it was very much like a one-man band kind of situation. And but it didn't really occur to me how much of an impact it would have.
So what drew you to food as a topic? So you obviously had a lot of ideas in film school, and you certainly weren't only thinking about food, but clearly with the launch of Chef's Table, you had a really strong connection. What is that connection?
Well, I love to eat, and that's kind of a gift that my parents gave me, was letting me sit at the grown-ups table and cooking well for me, at home. Like my mom, recipe chef, she did the recipes for Francis Mallman's cookbooks, kind of shadowing him and then, translating them into a format that a home cook can do. And then my dad was a manager of classical musicians, great classical musicians like Vladimir Horowitz. And so he was always going to the great restaurants like Le Cirque or whatever it was. And I would tag along on eating at some of these restaurants, and they wouldn't give me like a kid's menu. I would just eat what was in front of me. And I think that I got I like being praised for eating well. And then I really started to enjoy it. And kind of like that feedback just stuck with me. And food has just always been this incredible comfort. It's my memory, my parents are divorced, but it's the memories that I have of them together are around a table.
Yeah, I mean, were you, as a youngin', were you just asking questions of the chef? I mean, you clearly probably had that gene, that bone in your body that made you like inquisitive about everything in your world.
Yes. I mean, I asked a lot of questions. I was also a participant. So when my mom was doing her recipe testing, before she was into the cookbook, she was doing recipes for magazines, and I was shelling peas. I was like part of the process.
So cool.
And they let me, like, I created my own dessert called David's Delight. And it was literally just like, I was like, we're going to serve this ice cream in a wine glass. Like, how crazy
Hey,
is
man,
that?
it's probably like the early
Ice cream in a
2000s.
wine glass with a maraschino cherry and chocolate sauce. And that was like, I felt like I had invented something. And that was an incredible feeling.
So Jiro comes out, lots of acclaim, as an indie darling on the circuit. And really, it starts getting folks at this newly launched platform called Netflix, at least as a streaming platform, thinking that maybe food programming is a bigger thing. Let me ask you about the first season of Chef's Table. Massimo Barber, Malman, Nikki Nakayama, Ben Schwery, and Magnus Nilsson is your opening lineup. And how are you booking these chefs for your initial launch? Because that's like an important decision. These are the folks who mean this is Chef's Table right here.
Yes. So for the casting, and this has been, a very important part of the show, we were trying to make something that was like, we're going to make other mini, and when I say mini, they're still like an hour long, Jiro Dreams of Sushi's about other chefs and their stories, because I just felt like that format worked. It performed really well on Netflix, and nobody else would hear the pitch. Here we go again with the innovation, is that, Netflix was the only people that were into it because they had the data on Jiro, and it was the complete opposite of today's environment. There used to be jokes about how Netflix greenlights everything, and now it's like nobody can get anything made anymore, and the pendulum has swung in the other direction. But we were fortunate enough to be able to get in there, and I teamed up with Brian McGinn, who's an executive producer on the show. He was working for me as an editor at first, and then I realized, this is a brilliant person. His taste is great. He made an amazing short film, and he knows he can help me find these stories. Francis Malman was easy because my mom had worked on the cookbook. And then Brian put together a list of the other chefs. I think that Clay Jeter, who's also a very important director on the show, showed me the Massimo Bottura, an article in, I think it was New York Magazine.
It was print that inspired you then, because this is not, you're not looking at YouTube.
In that case, I read an article that was put in front of me, and it had the romance and it had like the emotion, because it was really important that it's not just about food. And that's the whole thing about Chef's Table. It's a human journey. And that was the breakthrough on Jiro Dreams of Sushi, of course. It's a father-son story. We're not teaching you how to make sushi. We're showing you why. Why do they do it? Why are they trying so hard? We look at our chefs like kind of like superheroes in the sense that they have a talent or a power. They have to grow into it. The Spider-Man doesn't really become Spider-Man when he gets bitten by the radioactive spider. It happens when his Uncle Ben dies.
Right.
And then he realizes what he's supposed to be doing with this power, and he makes the choice not to just get revenge and kill the guy who killed Uncle Ben. He gives him to the police. He's like, I'm going to be better than that. And so that's the journey that we try to find for our various chefs. Yes, you have the talent. It's the environment that you grew up in. But like, what is that spark or that turning point? And so that's what we're looking for. The booking process on the first season was the hardest.
I bet.
Because
it's incredible that
nobody had done a show to that point where you need 2 weeks of their time. You're going in there like deep, Anthony Bourdain, it's kind of a quick hit, he goes in, he spends time with them. You spend a day with them,
which is definitely the kind of the example. It's like your comp at the moment is probably Bourdain, in some ways.
Yeah, Bourdain was my favorite because he was the one who was going beyond just what the food is. He was getting into the emotions,
and he was an auteur for sure.
Absolutely,
visually, he used the vocabulary of great directors.
Absolutely. So he was coming at it from a fine arts perspective, and he was a supporter of Jiro Dreams of Sushi and of Chef's Table as well. And so he was very kind to us.
Speaking of romance, that first season, one of the biggest moments I remember when it came out was the Malman episode, and having, his wife and his mistress in the same room, and that's some film right there. That's a documentary film, and go back and watch that episode. It's pretty compelling. Your face says it all. Did you realize when you were in that room that this was going to be like really impactful?
Well, I think when we were watching back the footage, we were like, how do we present this, in a way that is going to be, just like as it is.
I know.
And
Without comment.
that's kind of what we do. We always say if there's an issue in the story, and I was talking about this the superhero thing, we'll never jam a story into something that it's not. We're looking for a classic archetype to kind of build a skeleton for it, but our motto is to always just lean into the truth. We lean in, and that's, of course, obviously that's what all documentary filmmakers should do. And so we just present it as it is.
Yeah, and without comment. And I think you can take away what you want with Malman's backstory there. I want to ask you about scale. I mean, launching with 5, and it seems, launching with 6. I'm going to talk about scale. Launching with 6 chefs in your first season, it's remarkable. Like, it's like you have 6 documentaries on the slate. I mean, how did you process this slate of chefs to launch on Netflix all on the same day, all available at the same time? It was a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, that was the great challenge, especially coming from, as I said, Jiro Dreams of Sushi was a one-man band kind of thing. Growing the team and collaborating and trusting people was the biggest challenge at first, and then it became the greatest gift of being able to kind of let go. And, I mentioned Brian McGinn, who is a very important collaborator. And we also have Andrew Freed, who provided the entire production infrastructure and helped us fill in, a lot of the needed team members to be able to produce this kind of work at scale. But it was absolutely terrifying. I mean, I almost when we were in the middle of negotiations with Netflix, I almost just was like, this is impossible, because how am I going to provide this quality, meet the expectations of Jiro at scale?
Yeah.
And it's because of our brilliant team. And we're so fortunate to still have many of our team members. Danny O'Malley has been with us since the beginning, and he's kind of risen up to the role of executive producer and is a leader on the show. And, I'm grateful for them. It's impossible without them.
It's. I'm glad you recognize how difficult it was, because I respect it. So a major part of the show is the opening 3 minutes, and you have to tell the story right away. And do it in a way that gets us to continue watching, because you're on this platform that is as competitive as ever. And there's been a lot of food programming out there, a lot of good food programming. How do you think about that first 3 minutes? Because you're kind of hinting at big things to come, like a great filmmaker, but you do it every episode. How do you get down to that edit?
We look at it like it's like a Bond movie. You have to just drop the audience right into the action and do something exciting. Show them why they're watching it, exactly like you said. We have to hook them. And then there's something in that opening that has a theme that then will be continued throughout the movie. So, in the Bond movies, there's always something in that cold open. Yeah. You're right in the action. And then it doesn't necessarily immediately connect to the rest of it as you go back to the beginning and start to kind of tell the origin story. It comes back throughout, and it threads throughout. And so keeping people's attention spans on a hour-long or 45-minute-long documentary series is as challenging as it's ever been.
Well, yeah, with the platforms,
Correct.
with a swipe left, swipe right, and you're watching The Diplomat, which is great.
Yeah,
you got to compete with The Diplomat,
of course. And that was actually, but it's that feature that got us here in the first place.
Yes.
Because there's no risk on Netflix. There was no risk of watching something or renting a movie, because it used to be you have to go to the video store. You'd have to think very carefully, what am I going to rent? Because I'm going to have to pay money for this, drive home, I'm going to have to return it. It's like, that's a big decision. On Netflix, you can take a risk and watch something different. And that's how we got a lot of the views on Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I think that's why documentaries became so popular, period, is because people were able to experiment and watch things that they might not normally rent at no real risk. And so I'm grateful for that. I think that Netflix has been a huge benefit. I think that they're incredible. I think that the competition is fierce, and I'm grateful that we're still kicking.
Well, you're still kicking. You're the longest running show on Netflix currently, which is remarkable to say. And you're kind of ramping up your production. I feel like pandemic, you probably had a lull, obviously, but now you're back in production. Let's talk about those productions, a little bit about pre-production, and then really what goes into booking the chefs. I'm sure you're pitched by every major chef, of course. But how do you take those pitches, and are you still reading print the way that you found Massimo in that early pre-prep?
When you were talking about booking on the first season and how that's changed, in the first season we had to beg the chefs to give us the time to come in there and have to send them Blu-rays or DVDs of Jiro Dreams of Sushi and just like try to convince them. We would say, Dan or Magnus, Ben says he'll do it if you'll do it.
Yeah.
And then we're like, yeah, Ben's in. Like, Magnus, you're in, right? And then we're like, Ben, Magnus is in. Like, it was that kind of game that we had to play a little bit. And then miraculously, we all came in. They did it. And then season 2, now we're established. And so we are constantly getting pitched chefs. I have to say that the chefs that we tend to really gravitate towards are not the ones that want to be on TV. Although that's not a requirement by any means. Because sometimes, they need to be great storytellers, and it just happens that the chefs who tell the best stories are often, on television.
Yeah. And they've had other directors approach them. Yeah.
And that's totally fine. Well, recently we've been doing categories. And so this has been a way for us to kind of cut through the noise on the platform and specialize in an area that people are going to be excited about. And then also just kind of show the multiple dimensions of that thing. So we have a pizza season, we did a pastry, we did a barbecue, and now we have noodles, which just came out. And, our casting is led by Brian McGinn. He brings us, a number of different options. I have some things on my mind as well that I'll like bring in. And then we just kind of navigate through getting a nice contrast of characters. We want to make sure that they are willing to spend the time, that they are able to tell their story in a way that's compelling, or are willing to go to those deep places, which is a total requirement. And then, of course, there's like issues of scheduling and logistics and like all of that. But, we don't really take pitches for chefs. We come to them.
Yeah.
We come to
that
them.
makes perfect sense.
We come to them.
Right.
We read about them. A lot of it is through great journalism, I think, is the most important.
And I really appreciate that. You often highlight at least one journalist, if not two, as your talking head, experts about the chef. And I love that. I love that you link food writing and cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely does that happen. And I think going to the new season, Jamila Robinson, the editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit, has a great line about Kwame and Wache. And she's essentially saying that Kwame puts his guests on the New York City subway, which I'd never heard. That was an extremely original, cool conversation about this restaurant, Tatiana. And just let me ask you about that restaurant, Tatiana, one of your chefs from the new season. What drew you to this restaurant at Lincoln Center that is, and Lincoln Center,
Yes.
and that is doing such special work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jamila is so great. We're grateful for the experts because they really help us tell the story. And they tell it in a poetic way and really help frame it for the audience. So they're critical. I love that metaphor.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's both, it's literal and it's figurative. I mean, he's from the Bronx. He's bringing kind of like through the arteries of the subway system is the circulatory system of New York. He's bringing, all the different kind of foods and cultures that he grew up eating around the city. And he's bringing it all into the mecca of culture, Lincoln Center. And I was excited about this restaurant for a number of reasons. One, I think that Kwame is incredibly dynamic, very cool chef, great storyteller, tells stories through his food, which is one of the most important things for Chef's Table. My dad is the general manager of the Metropolitan Opera. Yeah. I spent a lot of time in Lincoln Center. Lincoln Center, not particularly well known for its food, but no more. This restaurant is just bringing a whole new cultural dynamic. And if food is art, if food is a craft of expression, then why wouldn't there be a great restaurant in Lincoln Center? And it's amazing that Kwame, he's so at the top of his game now.
Truly.
Just crushing it. I mean, there's a great New York Times profile on him. And so I'm really excited for people to see his episode because he's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much. I've read a lot about Kwame, and his books that he's put out have been quite, autobiographical.
Yes.
But you clearly were able to tap into some new veins there. When you're doing the Kwame episode and you're talking about his childhood, how much of that just comes up in the conversation Are you sending him materials ahead of time to think about? How does that production work? Because I feel a real strength of the show is not just the visuals, but the way you're getting these chefs to reveal, which you see so much food doc is not. It's
Yeah.
pretty canned.
Yeah.
Even going back to Bourdain, you saw performances that weren't as strong as those characters really are. But how do you get those quotes?
Well, that's the thing. The thing about Chef's Table, and that's something that is working for us, is that the chefs have all seen it. They've all seen the show. We are telling an origin story. It's not like a classic follow doc where you get to see the action unfold in real time in front of you. It's very much like a retrospective. It's a biography, really. Yeah. And in telling of the origin story, the childhood is absolutely critical, because that's how the sense, the smells, the tastes of childhood, the feelings that we have. Look at Kwame. His mom was running a catering business in the Bronx, and like that is formative, and then the journey in life takes you in all kinds of other directions, and then these things all kind of weave together to form what the current work is. So we never send the questions in advance. They know that we're going to go deep, and that's something that we also remind them of, and when we do our initial conversations with them, when we're doing our pre-production, we go in with our own outline based on the writings of the chef or the other interviews that we've seen. So we can kind of follow along on an outline of a biography that we have planned, but then also it diverges because sometimes we hear stories that they've never told before. A lot of the chefs say that an interview on Chef's Table is like it's like a therapy session.
Yeah, completely.
We go as deep as we can, because we're looking for the answer, just this feeling of why. Why do you do it? What does cooking mean to you? What does it feel like to you? Dan Barber says it so beautifully. It's like, because his mother died when he was young, and he's like, is this a way to kind of bring people around the table and find that feeling that I lost? I just think I find that's what keeps us going.
Yeah, it's
so
beautiful part of the show is the interview portion.
Yeah, that's everything to us, is the origin story.
What I also like about the show is every season there's at least one, if not three, restaurants I've never heard of, and I consider myself pretty plugged in. I try to do this professionally. And seeing a restaurant like Masala y Maíz in Mexico City be profiled, I thought that was tremendous. I'd never heard of this place. And tell us a little bit about why you chose this idea of South Asia and Mexico merging.
That is something we've always tried to do on Chef's Table, because we want to go off the beaten path. There will be some, I think that in season 1, Osteria Francescana was pretty famous, but then you're hearing about some restaurants that you may never have heard of. In the case of this current season of Chef's Table, which is about to come out over Thanksgiving, it's the first season in a while that doesn't have a specific niche kind of brand. And so what we really wanted to do was just kind of open up the world to some people and show them some things that we found extraordinary. And again, this is a credit to Brian McGinn and our network of experts. A lot of the people that appear on the show are the ones that are recommending restaurants to us. For Masala y Maíz, there's a lot of really interesting factors here that just make it really, really fun to watch. One, it's a duo.
Yeah.
You get a cool team. You get a really interesting, just from a culinary standpoint, you get a really cool combination of flavors that people just may not have ever even thought of, which I really love. But it seems so obvious. It's like, of course, these flavors are going to go together. They're spicy and like impactful and like beautiful to look at, incredible colors. They are, they also are cooking with purpose. And we're talking about, why do we cook? I mean, they were cooking to provide relief after devastating earthquake. They also then were standing up to the corrupt restaurant grift industry, or whatever you want to call it, in Mexico City,
which is really sticking your head out in a city known for violence and crime.
They are incredibly brave. And so they're brave both in their cuisine, they're brave in the way that they live their lives and stand by their principles. And it's also like a beautiful love story. It's like a wonderful thing.
I love that episode. Speaking of brave, you find the Pope of pasta in Italy, Pepe Guida, another restaurant I had not heard about. I'm not sure if our listeners are familiar. And really, you could call a lot of pasta makers popes in Italy. Why pick Pepe as your pope?
We chose Pepe because Faith Willinger, the godmother of Italy, told us to. She points the way for us a lot of the times. And, if you eat Pepe's food, and that's the thing, of course, you don't actually get to taste it, but you can see it. I think that it's incredible. Here's the amazing thing about Pepe, and he says it right at the beginning, and we also it was important also to put him in because we have Evan Funke, who's all about the fresh handmade pasta. People are like, the dried pasta, is that a bad thing?
I love that.
And the answer is no, it's different. It's just different. And I think that is really, really cool. And also incredibly dynamic personality and beautiful setting. And you're on the cliffs of Sorrento and like the sea air. And like Faith just sets it up so beautifully. And we love it. We love some good. We love some hyperbole. Chef's Table loves a little.
You need some hyperbole.
We love
you need
a little
to hang
hyperbole.
your hat on something.
We like a little fun.
And I like that you take a big picture topic, dry versus fresh, and like American perception of an ingredient in a culture, and how dried pasta is not good or whatever. This guy has clearly made a business and a life around dried pastas.
Yeah.
On this new season, you feature Wei Rong Wei, who has built an empire in London around Xi'an cuisine. And, China is so associated with rice. And, of course, that's well known and makes sense. But you are focusing here on Northern Chinese cuisine and wheat and noodles. And tell us a little bit about finding this chef in London and then going to China. And I'd love to hear about a production in China, like shooting American documentary in China. Can't be that easy.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the challenges right off the bat. If you're doing a story about noodles, and we've done a ramen episode, with Ivan Orkin, which was fantastic.
Bless. One of the top 5.
Thank you.
I'm not going to rank them, but that's definitely
that is an incredibly satisfying episode. And Ivan, of course, is just like is a wonderful person, and it's a heartbreaker, and it's an uplifting, incredible story. We needed to do Chinese noodles. Shooting in China is incredibly difficult, and Netflix is not even in China. You can't even watch Netflix in China. So we can't really play the Chef's Table, Netflix, cultural will help you thing. They don't care. It's incredibly expensive. And so we were fortunate to find a chef doing Xi'an cuisine in London, but that was doing it like very authentically and that had that connection. So mostly it's filmed in London.
Exactly.
We sent a tiny little splinter crew. It's very expensive to shoot in China. Tiny little splinter crew of key department heads, like I think it's like 3 people, and then a local crew. And we're grateful that it worked out and that we have that. One of the things that we love to do on Chef's Table is help people see the nuance of a cuisine within a country. So Xi'an food is incredibly different from Szechuan or Hunan cuisine or the other Chinese cuisines. It's a massive country. The cuisines are totally different. And so Xi'an cuisine is all about wheat. And people think about Chinese food as being all about rice. And that's just not, that's not it there. It's about bread, it's about dumplings, it's about noodles. And her relationship with the wheat, and that's actually the cold open there, is as simple as it's like a love of wheat and like the power of this like flour. They call it like flour food.
Yeah.
And it's like it goes to the origins of culture. The cultivation of wheat has everything to do with how civilization kind of evolved from being, tribes of hunter-gatherers into like larger establishments. And of course, China being like the most massive populous country. I just think that's really, really fascinating.
And you had the Fuchsia Dunlop interview setting the table with that great context about wheat food.
Yes.
Which, again, bringing in journalists. I love that you do that just to provide the context.
Yeah, they really lead the way for us in a lot of ways in forming the story. And their work is absolutely critical. And then we love, just pulling noodles, just slamming those noodles on the table. Her food just stunningly beautiful.
Yeah, the Biang Biang scenes of her in her home kitchen. She looks cool. She's like rad. I want to totally try her food in London. And I mean, when you're looking at noodles, pasta versus like Asia versus Europe, and like that's a conversation that always happens on like podcasts and like are Asian noodles, is that pasta, and is Italian pasta noodles, and there's like this kind of like semantic game that is played, but you decided to use noodles and you highlighted both. Was this ever a challenge to like figure out how noodles are used in culture?
No, I mean the only challenge is that we only have 4 episodes. Like that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Is selecting 4 to represent noodles. And if you ever look at our Instagram posts or whatever, it's always like, well, what about,
Of course.
what about pad thai? Like da da da.
Are you reading the comments?
Occasionally, if we find it entertaining, we like to keep our eye on the pulse and or our whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
You're listening to your audience.
We try to listen to the audience, and we get emails, messages. A lot of chefs reach out to tell us about not only just they're not advocating for themselves necessarily, but yes, of course, it's not all noodles are being represented here. These are 4 great stories about noodles.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that we can do. But what I do love about noodles is that they are global, and that's something that really brings people together. I think that whether it's you agree with our selections or you wish we had done something else, it's like just people connecting and having the conversation, I think, is like a positive
Completely.
thing. Yeah. And so again, it's like we bring people around the table. It's like noodles is global. People just love that.
Great.
I love it.
The noodles episodes are out now, and the new season of Chef's Table is out Thanksgiving weekend. Definitely check it out. I have some like broader questions about the series because I want to pick your brain a bit. And first, like, admittedly, is there a grail of yours? Is there a chef that you've wanted to feature that you feel like you haven't quite been able to land? And this doesn't have to be any kind of spoiling, but there's schedules are hard, right? There's got to be somebody.
We are very fortunate. We've been able to pretty much, because of the ubiquity of the show within the food world, people tend to respect what we're doing and they want to be on it. Some of the chefs that we would have led would be great Chef's Table chefs, have their own shows. Like, Rene Redzepi would have been a fascinating Chef's Table. He's been kind of in his own documentaries about himself. And so that story is being told beautifully. I think that, the ultimate Chef's Table story to me would be Paul Bocuse. Because or like Fernand Point, or like I love the history of French cuisine. We got to touch on it in Chef's Table France,
yes,
which is another spinoff of ours in the Trois Gros brothers episode, or Michel Trois Gros specifically. But we get to go back into the Trois Gros brothers and to Paul Bocuse and like kind of like that whole nouvelle cuisine, which was this huge breakthrough that I think that the world is still experiencing, which is like making the product the center of the thing. You move away from just the technique and the sauce, and it's like, let's serve the thing super simply. And it's a big artistic concept about using the fewest brushstrokes possible to convey the idea or to create the picture. And that's something that we're constantly challenging ourselves, is to move away from artifice and move towards truth and like beautiful storytelling that is like simple and elegant. And I think that that's what a lot of the great chefs have been moving towards in the world. And I think that was a huge revolution. And also, what a personality, what a guy.
Yeah.
Paul Bocuse is absolutely fascinating to me.
And I love looking at the Nouvelle movement and the Trois Gros episode in that France series, like looking at major culinary shifts and ones that stuck around, like flour leaves the equation completely, almost completely, and kiwis are on the menu. French Nouvelle was a really remarkable thing that we still feel today.
Serving a rare fish, serving a salmon sorrel, or only
plating food, not having it served tableside.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Like the art of the plate.
Yeah, and so these things, are just awesome.
So thinking about other culinary movements we've seen in our world, think about New American, what's happened in America in the 90s and using the farm as a set piece. You think about the rise of Asian American cuisine. Asian American cuisine is its own cuisine. And in the past decade, there's been a fully formed new cuisine, a third culture cuisine, so to speak. David, do you think about tackling these big topics in series. I feel like you're the one who is going to tell this story the best.
It's all character driven, so it's all about the person.
Right.
And whether it's in a category season, I don't know how to call them, themed seasons, or it's a not standard, an OG Chef's Table season.
Yeah.
It's all about character first. That's the most important thing to us. So we don't really tackle subjects so much as we tackle people. The subject matter is interesting when it comes from the point of view of the person.
Yeah.
So when I talk about Paul Bocuse, I just think that it's like, this is a person who is just moving this movement forward. And I just love that. He was an innovator and he was just pushing it. And then he was using his dynamic personality to kind of bring everybody along with him.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. I mean, these are profiles. I mean, this is what my question was a little obtuse, but
it's a good question.
Yeah, I just think about how Chef's Table has always been able to predict the future in some ways with some of the chefs that are highlighted.
Yeah.
And you've been well ahead of the curve. I think of Gaghan as one.
Yeah.
That was well before any of the major accolades, I feel, in America, at least.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. And I always look for you guys. David, one or two episodes that you just pops up in your head that just gives you a lot of joy. I'm not going to ask you about favorites because that would be rude.
Sure.
We don't ask about favorite kids on the show, but
yes.
But I do want to ask you, I mean, do you have some episodes that really stick with you?
I mean, yes, of course. And I mean, they're specifically the ones that I myself directed because that's where I'm on the deepest dive into the journey. And forming the personal connection with the chef to build the trust, to be able to tell the origin story and to talk about their childhood and the traumas and the ups and the downs of the whole story. Jung Kwan immediately comes to mind. Episode 1 of season 3, she leads immediately saying she's not a chef. And that's the most Chef's Table thing you can say. It's perfect. She's fascinating. She doesn't have a restaurant. She cooks for the other nuns at the monastery and guests who want to come and learn temple food and the history, the connection with nature, the smells and the sense of the fermentation and the jars and the experimentation that she's doing. Just she has these jars just full of, just has these jars just full of kimchi or soy sauce. And she came to LA not long ago to do a pop-up at Baru, which is a terrific restaurant. I'm so happy that they're back. They disappear and come back in different formats.
So happy about that.
It's oh, here's a bottle of soy sauce. This is a 10-year soy sauce. Yeah. And you're just thank you. Yeah. That was just an amazing experience and so serene and just beautiful being in the mountains.
I'm glad you brought that one up. That one was important for, I would believe, Korean food in the world. I mean, having, temple cuisine and Buddhist food be represented on an international show. Yeah. Pretty amazing.
And she's so funny. That's what's so interesting. You think it's going to be so austere, and she disarms you with her humor and everything. She could smell the beef barbecue and garlic on us, and she's like, "Oh, I know what you were up to last night."
Funny, yeah.
Because they don't even eat garlic at the temple because it's a distracting smell. Yeah. It's too powerful. It sticks with you, and it makes you crave more. Massimo Bottura. It was the first episode of the series. He is just so larger than life. It's a beautiful romantic story between him and Lara, and daring to fight the well-established food norms of Emilia Romagna. Mm-hmm. The 6, just the high drama of the 6 tortellini on the plate and the outrage that it caused and stuff. And then it's like opera, it's really, really fun. And, he's a dear friend. And so, and Gaghan, as you mentioned as well, and getting to go to India and become very close with him. So, I'm moved by the relationships that we form with our chefs. And, chefs are just so generous. They're so lovely, and they have they're great. These are great hangs,
Yeah, they're great hangs. I mean,
it's fun.
You wrap production, you probably have a pretty nice time at the end of the production.
It's the best job. Yeah. It's the best job. Sometimes I'm just sitting when I shot with the Roca brothers for Jordi Roca's pastry episode. There are just moments where it's I have multiple cameras going, I have my monitors there, and then some lamb cracklings just appear on the table, or and
little snack for the director.
Yeah, and I'm just this, I feel like I'm getting away with something here. nothing but gratitude comes.
Yeah, your love of food is so clear, David, and I hope our listeners can realize that you aren't just a filmmaker, but you're a real lover of cuisine, which I love. I wanna ask you about beverage. We talk about coffee a lot on the show, and I feel it's a topic that is global, and of course wine and beer. How do you think about beverage and chef? Because it's not typically the chef's job to
Sure.
manage beverage.
Sure.
But these are like some of the biggest stories in the world, and
Absolutely.
they have great characters.
Great character, great history.
Of course.
I mean, it's the vineyards or distilleries that have survived war and chaos and throughout history. You see these numbers of the years on the bottle of like when it was founded, sometimes hundreds of years old. It's amazing. It's an incredible thing. I think that there could certainly be an excellent show about this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a chef could be a barista.
I think that if you're making something that is that tells a story and is meant to be enjoyed and requires a craft and a dedication, then it's well within the category. Absolutely.
I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So you're there. Let's go.
Let's go. I mean, it's amazing.
I'm with it
to hear that because I feel like I agree.
Yeah.
And also just even things like mineral water.
Yeah.
There's like things in our world that maybe don't fall directly in the chef world, but are part of food culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's about character.
Yep.
And I think that, we always love a character, especially, these, the beverage makers, like the distilleries and the vineyards, they're institutions. And you always have a person who's trying to hold up that history and keep up the standards. And that goes back to, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. Like, am I worthy of my father to be able to continue this? And, my dad, general manager of the Metropolitan Opera, has won 6 Emmys. He's like a big deal. My grandpa was the managing editor of the New York Times. And so this is something that is directly relatable to me. And in some of our stories on Chef's Table, we talk about things like this. And then, that was the big theme of Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And I think that a beverage, or what is it, Chef's Table liquid, whatever you want it to be, that kind of story would factor heavily.
On This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. David, are you ready?
No.
The best fruit.
Banana.
Where's the best banana you've ever had? Where was that?
I mean, I'll eat any banana. I just love bananas. They're just like, they come in their own packaging.
Yeah.
And never let you down.
The worst vegetable.
I don't think there are bad vegetables. I think there's bad cooking. I think vegetables that are often prepared poorly. I think that raw celery is a disaster with the strings and whatnot. I think that's also why kids sometimes don't love vegetables, is because they're getting like weird celery strings.
Yeah.
I think that eggplant is so often cooked, undercooked, and just like can be gross if you do it wrong. But I mean, with what I've seen and what I've tasted, there is no such thing as a bad vegetable. If you treat the vegetable with love, you're good.
The best dessert.
Creme brulee.
Your favorite city outside America to visit for food?
Tokyo.
How much time have you spent there?
A lot. Tokyo has everything. And the chefs in Tokyo, the Japanese chefs in Tokyo, whatever it is that they're cooking, they go to that country.
Yeah.
Like they go to Italy and learn pasta and they bring it back.
Yeah.
They go to Spain, they learn how to make paella. They learn pizza and they bring it back. Like they're serious about food. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Great answer. A restaurant you wish you could bring back from the dead?
Well, it's happening. Somni is coming back. So that's really exciting. So that was a restaurant that I was really sad that closed, because as far as like a tasting menu goes, that is both interesting and just super delicious.
Yeah.
Like it just tastes so good. Somni is a restaurant created by Aitor Zabala. It was inside Jose Andres Bazaar in the SLS Hotel in Los Angeles that closed right at the beginning of the pandemic, I believe. And it was very sad because this was a restaurant that was super fascinating, and it had those kind of like super innovative kind of like I remember there's like a chicken skin milfoy, like just like super delicious, weird and different things, but always interesting and always just so good.
Yeah, you nailed it. Like delicious.
Yeah, and like a tasting course that you feel good afterwards. Like you don't feel like over full. Like he just completely understands he does an art, but he also understands the eater's experience like really, really well.
Gotcha. Oh.
So that's coming back. We're excited for the new Somni. He's been kind of teasing it for a long time. It's taken a long time to get it right to the point where he's going to open. He's a real perfectionist, and that's really, really exciting.
Your favorite cookbook of all time?
I mean, I'm going to go, I love The Art of Simple Food. This is, it's just exactly what it says it is. I like the way the recipes are kind of prose, written in like a little bit more of a prose versus like a strict instruction, because it kind of teaches you how to cook. And I was listening to your Tom Colicchio interview, and I was like, oh, I like the way that he talks about how he wants people to learn how to cook without needing the recipe, rather learning like the principles behind it. I actually ordered both his book and the Jacques Pepin book.
Oh yeah,
after I listened to it. This book also has everything. Like you go into the index between The Art of Simple Food and the sequel book. You just go in the index. Like you go to a farmer's market. And this is one of the things I love about Alice Waters. And we have an exciting announcement about Alice Waters that I'm going to just tease.
Okay.
So I've been in conversation with her. You can go to a farmer's market and it's a thick book, but whatever you get there, just pick out the things that you like and just go to the index and you can find a cool thing to do with that.
It's really cool
with that
look
vegetable
at a book that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
And that's also why I say, there are no bad vegetables. Like it's just the cooking.
She's got a reason to cook one.
Exactly.
Or a reason for each one.
Yeah,
absolutely. Is there a favorite recent cookbook discovery that you've had?
I mean, I will give a shout out to this is not super recent, but I give a shout out to the Francis Mallman book.
Yeah.
7 Fires.
7 Fires. Yeah.
7 Fires. That's actually, so that and The Art of Simple Food are like my favorite cookbooks. 7 Fires is the best barbecue cookbook. And it's, first off, the photography, everything is beautiful. My mom worked on it. There's a great picture of her in there. And she makes sure that the recipes work. All the recipes work except for the one where you have to cook an entire cow.
Yeah.
And that, because the first thing that you need to do is get 4 strong men from the village to hoist the cow onto the onto the wooden frame. We can
find some strong men in New York.
We can find some strong men. So it can be done, but it's not really for a solo chef in the kitchen. This is a great book also. And again, I love books where you can look in the index, because if you're going product forward, you have a great piece of meat or a great vegetable or whatever it is, you look it up in the index, you can find something to do with it. And I absolutely love that. And then the other funny book that I read recently, I've been looking through the Escoffier cookbook.
Funny in a way of like pretty distant from where we are
exactly.
right now.
And just having to constantly look up what the things are. And then you look at a recipe, you have to then go find this sauce, and then that sauce refers to 3 other sauces.
Wow.
And this gives you the appreciation when you see a French kitchen and you see 30 guys in toques just like going at it in that thing, and you're just
the labor.
It's so intense. So that's a fun read.
Last one, your favorite sandwich?
I'd say that overall, I love a BLT. I think the BLT is just like a fantastic combo. It's just like it hits all the notes. You can add a little avocado to it, or like some turkey to turn it into a club sandwich. That's the Cali in you talking a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean, they don't accept me in New York anymore.
Avo, yeah, we like.
I'm too soft for New York. I'm too hard for Cali. Like, I don't know. I just love it. I love the crunchy bacon. Jones on Third is my favorite sandwich place.
Oh, cool.
I love they do such a clean, elegant BLT or club sandwich if you need a little more protein in there. And then they also have this incredible short rib sandwich that you really have to eat at the restaurant, because it like gets a little, when you can't get these things takeout. The good sandwiches, you got to go.
Have it plated the way they want to.
The short rib sandwich with like these braised onions and stuff. Yeah. It's just like so good.
And Joan is around.
I just crush it.
Yeah, Joan is
she's
around.
The best. She has quite an institution there. They have 2 locations. I believe that there are 2. The 2 that I go to, there's one on 3rd Street and then there's one in the Valley. And the consistency is just remarkable.
Love that.
Every time you get it, it's exactly the same and so good.
David Gelb, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you.
Eliza, we're back with 3 things. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to talk about our favorite number.
Our favorite number in the what is it, numerical calendar? No, order in all of numbers.
In all of
All
numbers.
the numbers. 3 is our favorite. What is your first thing?
My first thing is I had a very delicious tea latte this weekend at Ursula in Brooklyn, which is one of my favorite places to go to for breakfast burritos. They do a lot of New Mexican food. But I got a horchata tea latte there that had rooibos, oat milk, vanilla beans, cinnamon, and then toasted rice for that, classic horchata vibe. And it was just perfectly spiced and well balanced, and I actually got it iced, which was like maybe my last iced drink of the year. And I like Ursula for a lot of things, but I just think it was a really like delicious caffeine-free tea to have. I'd already had my coffee for the day, and I was chatting with Eric, who's the chef there, about it, and he said that he was in New Mexico where he's from, and he was at a cafe that had a horchata tea latte on the menu, and that it was so bad that he was like, I know I can do this better because there's so many like, nostalgic, amazing flavors in horchata, and also it could be added to different teas. And so I think he really has taken it to the place that it should be at.
I'm really curious about this drink because I think chilling it would be totally my move. I love a chilled chai variation, and horchata is wow. I mean, if you get it, right, it's like truly one of the best drinks. I mean, up there in the canon of all cold things to drink.
Yeah, and I think also it does well mix with other flavors like the rooibos, for example. And when I worked at a coffee shop in college, we would do like a horchata with a shot of espresso in it. So I feel like there's kind of lots of different areas you can go in.
What was the Evanston barista scene like when you were there?
Oh, I mean, it was not third wave. It was just like learning how to make a basic cup of coffee. I worked at a place called Unicorn Cafe that's
cool.
No longer around anymore. But I did learn how to steam milk and how to plunge toilets and all of those things.
Yeah. Life skills for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
What's your first thing?
Well, on the coffee train, I have a coffee pick. I was meeting with some folks from the state of Michigan last week, and a couple folks there were these amazing roasters from Traverse City, Michigan, which is in northern Michigan. Mundo's Roasting and Company is doing extremely high quality roasting, and they were selling or offering 2 Ethiopian roasts. One was an anaerobic, one was a naturally processed, and they had also a Costa Rican. And really, when somebody's presenting coffee at an event, I sometimes feel like I'm going to get a really hard roast coffee. I think that's like the tendency. And people have been very kind to send me sample bags from time to time. And oftentimes the roasting is not to my liking because it's just too hard and you can't really taste the flavors of the agriculture in the coffee. Well, Mundo's is doing an incredible job in letting that coffee speak for itself. It's very lightly roasted. They have 3 locations in Traverse City, and it's a cool family story. We've got Jack, Ben, Adam, and Father Dan running these 3 locations, all up in Michigan. And you know what? I love my Michigan products, and this is honestly one of my favorites of recent time.
Well, I feel like you are really a coffee connoisseur, so if you like it, it must be great.
It was great, and it was great to see some Michigan folk in New York. What's your next thing?
My next thing is I just want to shout out this Bon Appetit video series that I've been watching a lot of as
Back
of
on the
late.
BA train.
I know. Well, it's Lucas Sin's Street Eats series. Have you seen this before?
Oh my, of course. It is so good.
Yeah, I think Lucas is really just such an incredible chef, and the way that he talks about food comes from this like deep knowledge. And so I love watching all of his videos, but especially the Bangkok series because I'm planning a trip to Bangkok in the new year, and I've just been kind of like pre-gaming the trip while I've been researching by watching his videos, and they're all so great. And I'm going to apologize in advance for my Thai pronunciation, but one of them that I really like is about this kind of street stall called Fikeo Yao Rat, which is in Chinatown in Bangkok, and they do crazy wok stir-fried things, especially like the water spinach. They talk about this technique that's called pad phai dong, which is a Thai technique of achieving emulsion in a sauce by intentionally splattering a little bit of water with the oil and the smoke, and it creates this like wok hei flavor and also this beautiful emulsified sauce. And that's a technique across Asia, but they're doing it in a really cool way on the street. There's also like these fruit stalls that he's going to and eating all these different beautifully dressed fruit, which fruit is a huge passion of mine and kind of like my only goal for this trip is to eat as much fruit that I
I
can't
remember
find
your,
here in
your
the
trip
US.
to Florida when you had the
Yes,
road trip report. I loved
exactly.
that.
And I had like sour sop and all of these
Yeah.
things, mamey, which was really special. So I just think even if you're not planning on going to Thailand, the videos are just so special. And I just wanted to shout them out.
I love that shout out. And Lucas I'll say something about Lucas. Like, he's been on the show a couple times, and please come back, Lucas. Love this guy. What a technically sound chef. He's like got these incredible ideas, but he's really got the skills to back it up. And then when he hits the road and he's got cameras rolling, it's like he's so casual. It's very effortless. And like I've said this, and I wrote this in a piece when I profiled him. He's like the next big talent, I would say, for television. And I'm surprised that he hasn't had a big television show yet. It's probably because he's been living in Asia and maybe he doesn't want to do television. How about that? Maybe this is what he wants to do. I love when he's such an educator when it comes to it. And his series MBA is a favorite of mine. I linked in the newsletter on Friday many times. I love that you found it.
Yeah, I think he really just has this deep knowledge and appreciation for technique and what different people are doing. And, maybe this is a little thing, but when he is walking around and he's, talking about the way that like these street food places are set up in the same way of like a guard system in a fine dining restaurant. And he's talking to all these people working there and calling each of them chef as a sign of respect because that's what they are. But I think those little details really just give insight into the way that Lucas views food. And then you can kind of trust how he's talking about it even more.
I love that. And he's not like food creator guy. He doesn't like try to like do it to like be the one who's discovered this place. He doesn't like give himself a pat on the back, which I think is like the tendency for some creators to say like, I'm finding this hole in the wall around the hole in the wall. I mean, he's doing it truly out of a love of cuisine.
Yeah, and he does go to like very established and known spots and talks about like in Chengdu, for example, these really delicious fat, sweet noodles. And he talks about like why that one restaurant is so known for that.
Yeah.
And I think that is worthwhile. And it kind of gets away from this trap of thinking that you need to be quote unquote discovering something.
Agreed. That's a well said. I like that point. It's definitely established places and real like food history there too.
Yeah. What's your next thing?
Okay. I've got a Chrissy's Pizza scene report.
Oh, okay. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's great. So Chris and Brooks Headley are coming on the show. I think this might run before it, so we'll call this the scene report before the interview. Now, okay, listen, this is like one of the most buzzed about restaurants in New York right now, even though it's truly just a counter pizzeria. It's on Nassau in Greenpoint, and I went on Friday around 4:30, 5 o'clock, and the line was probably an hour and a half long.
That's so wild because there's so much pizza in that neighborhood also,
Question that came to my head right away. Like, wow, there's already a lot of pizza happening. And, this isn't like the fault of Chris and what he's doing at Chrissy's. I just think when you have a new pizzeria, I mean, Scars had lines for probably 18 months, 2 years, probably until the time they moved across the street.
And they still have lines on the weekends.
Do they? Yeah, I haven't been down there on the weekends in a while. So, I mean, these lines are part of like New York City dining culture. I mean, what a fun date, just like wait in line for pizza. I kind of like it. I mean, I'm all for it. I can't shit on lines. I mean, I would say for research, we got to skip the line, to try the pizzas and actually had the pizza when people were watching us, which was like, because it's like a little bit of a fishbowl.
Yeah.
You're waiting. So anyways, this is how the sausage is made. I had a very short window. He was nice enough to bless us with pizzas, which I paid for. And I'm going to talk about these pizzas because they're fucking amazing. And I really think this is one of my new favorite pizzas in New York. 2 pizzas on offer on the day. I actually had 3. He had a plain cheese. He had a salad pizza, which I'll talk about. And he had a white pie, which I did not try. First up, the plain cheese. He's doing like a 50 to 60 hour fermentation. It's as thin as you want it when you're getting great fermented, flavorful doughs. So he's really doing this great structure where it's like the perfect crispy slice. And he's using a blend of New Jersey tomatoes and Stanislavs from California. So he's using domestic tomatoes. And, I think on the salad pie, he's putting fresh arugula on top, pepper hard, and grana padano. So that's like his point of view with pizza is like peppery arugula with grana padano. And both pies had a lot of olive oil. I would say more than I usually like. So that's like the one thing that I'm just not. It reminded me of DeFara back in the day when DeFara used to shower every slice with a lot of olive oil. It's a point of view. Not my favorite way to do pizza, but I liked it a lot.
I have a clarifying question on the salad pie because I'm very interested in salad pizza and it's hard to find here in New York. Was there any cheese or sauce or anything beneath the arugula, or it's like the cooked pizza dough and then after it comes out of the oven, it gets arugula, parm, and olive oil?
Great question. Follow up. Great journalist instincts.
My pizza journalist.
No, it was
instinct.
good. It was a cheese pie bolo. So
Oh, okay.
it's basically the cheese pie with a little bit of with peppery greens on top.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like that. I find that sometimes in LA at like Abbott's Pizza and some of those classics,
Yeah.
they don't really have cheese beneath the salad and
know,
it's
right?
just the salad on top. But I like the idea of eating my cheese pizza with a hearty helping of
Exactly.
arugula.
Me too. I think the salad pie without cheese is, it's a choice, not my favorite thing. It doesn't really give me much. Chris started these pies out of his Bushwick apartment, and like that's over the pandemic, and really he was doing everything I think via Instagram, and like this mythology we've heard time and time in New York City restaurants, but for him to go from that pop up to like a full brick and mortar on Nassau in a place in Greenpoint that has lots of great pizza, bold choice, but really I love what he was doing. Great spirit in the pizzeria too. People were really cool who worked there, and great music. So I was really into Chrissy's. Highly recommend you checking it out. And honestly, it's not, the line moves. I think an hour and a half is probably ridiculous. It's probably like more like 45 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to go on a weekday maybe and see if there's less of a line, but I will go anywhere for a good salad pizza.
What's your last of three things?
My last thing is not food related, but I just saw the movie Conclave. Have you seen this movie?
Oh man, we were gonna do our Oscar thing at the end. Okay, yes, I've seen it. I saw that on Sunday.
What'd you think?
I mean, what a great movie! I loved it. I thought it was one of my favorite movies of the year.
Yeah, I really liked it as well. I found it to be just really fun and gossipy, and also just the way that it was shot was so beautiful. I was seeing it with a couple of film people, and there were audible gasps at some of the scenes, like the umbrellas, for example. I don't want to like
Love the
spoil
umbrella
anything,
scene.
but the way it's shot is so beautiful, and also just having this inner politics scheming about who's going to become the next pope, which is the whole plot of this movie. And the whole movie basically takes place inside the Sistine Chapel, which they recreated for the movie. I went on this whole deep dive about the production design and really like the incredible amount. At first I was like, how do they have access to all of these places? And then obviously they didn't, and they just replicated them and built them in such a beautiful way. So if we're talking about Oscars, which I don't feel I'm that educated on, I definitely think for like production design, this is going to win because it's just incredible.
If you're into like paper and stationery porn, it's truly one of the greatest films of all time. Like what incredible card stock they're using, at the Vatican, I must say.
That's so funny because I don't think I noticed that at all.
Really? And the pens, I was like, wow, the pens are pretty
the pens,
amazing.
the wax seals,
Yeah.
certainly the robes and the jewelry and the vaping and all of that.
Yeah,
that's
there was
going
like,
on.
it's great to like see, all the different cardinals come together from around the world. And it's a great way to show, of course, the Catholic Church and how this big decision is made, but how that church spans the world and how culturally Catholics are not all the same. And I thought that was like striking, and the acting was really good.
Yeah, it's a great cast and also just really fun. The discourse around this movie I've been really enjoying. There are a lot of good memes online that are kind of comparing the movie to RuPaul's Drag Race, which I think is a very apt comparison. And I
like
recommend John Paul Brammer, who, as the name suggests, is a lapsed Catholic and is queer. And it has this great newsletter just kind of talking about like the delight of like the gossipy tone of this movie and how, especially for people who are Catholic or ex-Catholic and have this kind of connection to the church, it's very enjoyable. So that would be a fun newsletter for you to read.
Yeah, I would love to read more criticism. I haven't read up on it because I just saw it. And I've been like definitely trying to watch movies. This is like the time of year I always try to go to the theater quite a bit. So I'm like, I feel like I've caught up on some movies. Do you want to do a little movie corner right now?
Yeah, I'm just going to say you can find me on Christmas Day doing Baby Girl at the theater, which is being released on that day. And also Nosferatu. So I was like, maybe I'll do a Nosferatu Baby Girl double feature. The other movie I really want to see that's coming out is the new Luca Guadagnino movie Queer, which I believe is coming out
Daniel Craig is the lead,
week. And I saw the trailer for the first time in the theater at Conclave and I burst into tears at the trailer. So I
it was
feel like
touching.
I'm really excited.
I just saw Challengers too.
Oh.
Which I had not seen. I saw that last night.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah, very fun movie. I love how it's shot.
The
talented.
soundtrack is awesome.
Yeah, the soundtrack was distracting at first, but I really bought into it. And of course, at the end, the soundtrack is incredible.
Yeah, the final tennis scene in that movie is really great. And the soundtrack is so fun and clubby. And I actually had to ban it from my apartment because we kept on getting into accidents because we were like playing the Challenger soundtrack because we had to get dinner ready fast enough. And then there would be like beans spilled on the ground because we were going too fast, or it was like too hardcore for daily life.
Yeah. I think I get that vibe. I actually should go back and check out the Spotify. I've seen Anora. Have you seen it?
Yes, I really loved it.
Yeah, right. Like truly cool New York movie. Like really like detailed. And I mean, I'm doing film criticism on this podcast.
I feel like we have to get Clayton on the mic actually to talk about Oscar bait because he is our true expert.
I feel like let's switch him in. Want to do that?
Clayton, do you want to grab my chair for a second?
We'll put Clayton on, and while Clayton's moving over, I am going to talk about A Real Pain because I thought this movie was not a great movie, and so that's my hot take. But I thought the performance from Kieran Culkin really touched me. I think that we all have characters like that in our lives, especially living in a city with many characters. And I felt like the movie was maybe not a full work, and Jesse Eisenberg is a great director, a baby director, I would say. Man, we're really doing movie criticism here. But I really thought that they brought a wider lens to the Holocaust, and I thought that that's always a good thing. So I liked that. Clayton, you are on the mic now.
I am on the mic. I'm seeing that movie on Friday.
Okay, so you haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen
Have you
that.
seen any of the movies we've talked about since?
Not yet. I have not seen Conclave, although that is my pick for Best Picture.
Okay, yeah, I think it's probably up there.
Yeah, just because its success at the box office, the fact that the Catholicism aesthetically is having a moment, I think the gossipy nature of it, I think the politicking, but without politics.
Yeah.
So that in a different playground is popular because I don't think anybody wants to really think about politics at the moment, but they're okay thinking about political maneuvering when it comes to that.
Yeah, it's like the gamesmanship of it is what we want.
And you got Ray Fiennes, who's somebody who people love, who hasn't gotten his gold yet. So I think that's big.
Yeah.
Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah, truly a great role. So I got to see Amelia Perez, which is on Netflix now, and I really enjoyed it. So I know there's a lot of discourse around it, but I really enjoyed it. I like musical movies in general. I thought that it was the log line is like chaos. It's like a very long log line, and I really don't want to spoil too much about it. I just think it's worth checking out, and you can make your own decision. But I feel like in the Oscars race, that one is absolutely at the top of the list for many.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's available on Netflix, which makes it very easy for people to watch, which is always a benefit. Although it's a musical, and there's another musical that is getting a lot of Oscar hype.
Oh, yeah.
Wicked,
right.
Now, I don't necessarily believe it. I think this is a lot of marketing.
Yeah.
Because musicals don't always do that well.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, like Chicago, that was huge. But I do think that it could be a player, possibly. Yeah. I don't necessarily believe in it, but we'll see. It's going to be huge. I mean, it's going to be massive.
And they definitely want box office at the Oscars. They definitely want some popular movies there. They can't just have our house movies. That's like a real strategy.
They should. I mean, they should. If they want people to watch, they should.
What do you know about The Nickel Boys and The Brutalist?
Okay, so Brutalist is one of those movies that I feel like it's very long. It's been hyped to the gills. I don't know if it's necessarily like a movie that a regular audience is going to love, but I mean, the Academy may really, really like that. So Adrian Brody's getting a lot of buzz for best actor. He's sort of, he won for The Pianist, and then he sort of disappeared when it came to movies. He's done a lot of stuff in TV. So he's sort of the front runner for best actor. But The Brutalist is just, I think, I haven't seen it, but I just think it's not going to be something that's accessible enough to really win like Best Picture. I don't see that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do want to see it. I've heard it's great.
I've heard it's great too. I want to see it. Nickel Boys, Ramel Ross, it's like his big directorial debut,
Oh, yeah.
and a really acclaimed director who is young, and he's made a stylistic choice by shooting that first person, which
Yes.
is interesting, not as accessible, and what an incredible novel by Colson Whitehead that has won many awards 4 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how that first person point of view works.
Yeah.
But I feel like this Oscars race is heating up.
Yeah, the big thing is like a lot of the movies that are in contention aren't movies that a lot of people know about, and a lot of them have had their small releases or they're being platformed right now. I think that Nickel Boys definitely, it's one of those movies that people are either going to really love or they're not going to be able to handle it because of the POV.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it. I love sort of taking chances like that.
too.
I love that, like a bold artistic shot.
Which is why I like Amelia Perez so much. I think it's like stylistically, it's like big topics of the day, and it's a crime thriller, but it's also in a musical. And Zoe Saldana, I mean, I have been just loving Lioness. Like I'm a huge fan of that show, which is very different from Amelia Perez.
Yeah.
But to see Zoe do a musical theater piece like this, and to your point, it's accessible. It's on Netflix. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to continue reading the discourse because it's pretty polarizing film. So.
Is Selena Gomez going to get a nomination?
Absolutely. I think I've heard and read that there was maybe a little bit of slight negativity about her role, and I think that was personally uncalled for. I think she's really good in it, and it's definitely a supporting role. But I was liking that performance. She's very talented.
Great.
Do you want to just jump back in? I actually have a last thing because this is 3 things. We each do 3 things. We only talked about 5.
Yeah, what's your last thing?
My last thing, and I hope if you've made it this far, thank you. We went a little bit longer with movies, but we get fired up about movies. This is Oscar season. There is a new N.A. Negroni in town.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting because St. Agrestis has done the phony Negroni, and you find it everywhere, and it's very delicious. The one knock I have had with St. Agrestis over the years has been there's a lot of sugar in there, and you feel it. It's very sweet. And I feel like having more than one at the end of the night or the beginning is a little bit overkill, so I only can do one. So Lapos, first off, is not as good as the phony Negroni. I have to say that from the start. The bitterness is not as bitter, and it's not as well composed. That said, it's way less sugar, and I think that that's a really smart thing that they've done is kind of bring the sugar level down, so it's more like sessionable, as they say in the craft beer world. And really, I like the product a lot, and it's new to me, and I experienced it this weekend. And I'm going to keep following this product and maybe try it in a few more ways. You can have it over ice. It's in a cute little can, so easy to pack in a cooler, and I really like it.
Yeah, where did you find it?
Oh, you know what? I was at a event that our friend Osette Barbour was hosting.
Oh.
So she had it at this event, and I was like, okay, thank you very much, Lapos. Very cool.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, check it out.
Thanks for sharing your 3 things with me.
You too. This is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.